The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Welcome to the Success in Practice podcast. Thank you everybody for joining us again today. Today I'm joined by Peter Lamb. Peter has been an osteopath since 1983. After practicing in Sydney, he moved to Townsville at the end of 1986. He founded the North Queensland Osteopathic Clinic in its current location in 1994. Peter has been a past president of the Queensland branch and on the Federal Council of Osteopathy's peak professional body. He has had a wide variety of experiences in practice and has worked with several elite sporting teams and individuals, including North Queensland Cowboys and members of the Australian track and field teams. He treats largely structurally with an emphasis on soft tissues. Peter moved to North Queensland in 1986, where he helped expand the profession in that part of Australia. Peter is winding down now and looking at semi-retirement. I'm hoping today to look back at his career and get an insight into his journey and what we can learn from his journey. Peter, thank you for being on the podcast, mate. I know it's late, so thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem, Sammy.
Peter, I think the best value we can get out of today, I think, with you is to discuss how first of all, how you perceive the concepts of osteopathy, especially someone like yourself who's been around really since the early days of osteopathy in Australia. So I'd like to see how you perceive the concepts of osteopathy in terms of principles and philosophy, and then how you make those play out in your practice. You mentioned to me that that you think we seem to be moving away from what makes us osteopaths and gives us an identity. So I'd like to explore your thoughts around that. And you've spent some time in sports medicine as well, and you've got really a wealth of experience in that field. So it'd be good to talk about that as well. You mentioned, you've mentored, I should say, osteopaths over the many years that you've been practicing. And I'd like to really ask you some questions about how you've seen osteopaths evolve. And then maybe we can look at the current landscape of osteopathy in Australia. How do you think it's headed? What are some of the challenges you see along the way? And what I really want to also talk about is maybe the beginning, the genesis of osteopathy in Queensland and some of the challenges you guys had in those days. And I think to give maybe the younger practitioners an insight as to what it was like, maybe having the threat of not being able to practice. And so, mate, are you happy with discussing all that today? Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Oh, that'll probably fill.
That'll fill up our time pretty well. Maybe if there's anything you want to segue into or you feel like chatting about, feel free to kind of go into that direction. Look, I'll start off with some questions, and so we'll get to the clinical side of things in a minute, but I want to give people some history about your evolution in osteopathy. How did it start for you? Where did you study, and who were some of your early influences?
Yeah, I found out about osteopathy. I was in grade 12 actually, and I was reading a newspaper lift out of vocational courses and came across this little story on osteopathy, which I didn't know what it was, but I was showing it to my mother, and she says, "Yeah, you've been to one." There's a particular bloke that we used to go to every now and again to have a rub and a crack, and she goes, "Oh, he's an osteopath." And so I thought, oh, okay, that sounded interesting. So I just read up on it and decided, yeah, I might do that. And so there was only two options then. It was the Windsor College, it was called in those days. That was Evan Lollerman's college. And Brian Lambert was running that as well. That was Ann Cooper, I think, went through with Evan.
Yeah, and, I think that later became the International College. Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the other one was the New South Wales College. It was New South Wales College of Osteopathy, but it also went under the New South Wales College of naturopathic and osteopathic sciences. It
Yeah.
was a bit of a mouthful. But that was in St Leonards. I grew up in Forestville, and
Yeah.
St Leonards was a lot closer than the eastern suburbs of Sydney, so that's where I ended. That was the simple reason why I went there.
Yep.
But it was a good it was a fairly good training to start with. We certainly had we were throwing a lot more into the deep end with hands-on in those days, because basically part of your first year was to do a diploma of massage. So that had the advantages. We were taught a lot of hands-on skills right from the word go. And so quite a few of us could go out and earn a bit of money just doing that while we were still studying. And there was quite a few osteopaths at that time teaching the course, and so they kept throwing in a few manipulations and stuff like that they probably shouldn't have. But so it gave us a lot of hands-on right from the start. So that's why our training was very much touch and feel for what we were doing. Yeah. But then as we went through our training, we had the problem in 1979, I don't know if you knew, the Webb report came in, which was a government report on the registration of osteopaths and chiropractors and other allied treatments, And we, by that stage, we'd moved into the city, and our class and the class below us was getting a bit nervous because we were basically told that the only way we get in is to pass a government exam.
So was that a favourable report, the Webb report?
It was in the sense that it allowed a pathway for chiropractors and osteopaths, but it meant they had to be government registered.
Yeah.
I've got a copy of the report somewhere. If you
so previous to that time, Peter, if you were an osteopath, you weren't registered. You were just kind of
you just practiced.
You just called yourself an osteopath, and people came to see you.
Yeah, you could literally just call yourself an osteopath. There was no laws,
right?
But there were colleges around. There was, as I said, the one I went through, and then the Evans College, and there was a few others. A bloke called Robert Black had a college for a while there, and there's a few other ones around. But because we got a bit nervous in about 82, we split with the New South Wales College, and basically just went with George Stillian. I don't know if you know George.
Right. Yep.
And Alec Burton.
And so why did you get nervous? What were the nerves around? What was the feeling?
If we didn't pass the government exam, we wouldn't get in, and we needed our training to be more orientated that way.
Okay.
So we actually rented rooms off the Sydney College of Chiropractic in Ashfield, and there was only two years that went through this. That was if you ever heard the word Pacific College of Osteopathic Medicine, that was that 2 years, and we ended up having sitting exams with the government exams. They're out at Sydney University. I sat in 83, and there were 64 people sat, and only 14 passed.
Yeah, wow.
That what group I went through. Out of that 14, 12 of my classmates.
So that's a board exam, is that correct?
Yeah.
So you fronted up in front of a board of, I think, 12 chiropractors and one osteopath, is that right?
It was mainly 2 weeks of written exams, and then we had to do a practical exam. The written exams were all done out at Sydney University at the time. That was ours. There were earlier ones that were different. And there's another story about that I'll tell you a bit later. So there wasn't many. A lot of people didn't get through, as you can imagine. The fact that many sat in the year we were there, and only so many passed. Obviously, a lot of people never practiced.
Yeah. So that would have been daunting to people that are kind of just going through the course to see you guys with such a high failure rate.
Yeah. Well, it was lucky. Well, our class went through quite well, because we were pretty. There was only 14 in our class anyway.
Do you think those exams, Peter, were kind of like a good indication of your competency? Like, I know they were hard, but did they let the people through that deserved to go through, and did they, did they do the job that they were meant to do?
By the time they got to ours, they were pretty tough. But yeah, it didn't mean that. I'm sure some good osteopaths didn't get through.
Yeah, right.
Because they didn't get through the academic side of it.
Okay.
Practically, on hands-on, they were probably great. There was a lot, because before the exams, if you've been practicing for 7 years, they just registered you. There's a grandfather clause.
Yep.
So a lot of the extra ones that were sitting those courses were ones that didn't get through on the grandfather clause.
Okay. So maybe they've been there for 6 years and they just didn't get the 7 years. Yeah, right.
I knew a few of them that didn't get through. They were a few years ahead of me at the New South Wales College.
Yeah, okay.
And they didn't get through. Yeah.
Right, mate. So, okay, so then obviously you did get through and you began practicing in Sydney.
Yeah.
You only, maybe I think you got a couple of years in Sydney before you moved to Queensland.
Yeah, I was
those early years. Yeah. So those early years for you, where did you work? Who were your influences? Tell us about that as an early graduate.
Yeah, while I was a student, I used to work at Malcolm Jack's clinic a bit.
I don't know
if you've heard of Malcolm.
I know, yeah. I think Malcolm's still practicing over at Motorvale, somewhere out there.
Yeah, DY Motorvale.
It
was DY then, yeah. Yeah, Malcolm's a bit of a character. There's quite a few people have gone through Malcolm's practice over the years.
Yeah.
I think I was the first student that ever spent time there. And but I was never really keen on staying in Sydney, so I was only just working part time at down at Freshwater there, Harbourwood, and then but I was looking to get out, and I was still working night work at the Harbourwood Diggers Club, and so as soon as I can, I left Sydney. And
that's a beautiful part of Sydney that you left, mate.
Oh, I can't. If I had to go back to Sydney, I would go back there, except I can't afford it. Yeah, no, it was if you have to grow up in Sydney, the Northern Beaches was a great place to grow up. Yeah, it's so then I just packed all my belongings in the car in '86 and just went for a slow cruise up the coast. I was always going to go to the North Coast of New South Wales, but
fast forward to now, right? Tell us what your clinical week looks like now. Like, tell us about that. Like, what's a normal week for you look like in the clinic?
I'm here. Well, there's 5 other osteopaths here. I've got 5 associates. We could really do with another 2 if someone's looking for a job. I still treat patients, but I only treat about 6 a day. I'll do a few in the morning, have a long lunch, and a few in the arvo. I try and pack them in with all the others.
Is that indicative of what how you've been practicing throughout most of your career, or were you a lot more kind of busier and more into it, say when you were a younger man? Yeah,
I never did more than about 9 or 10 a day. I didn't like doing more than that, But I've pretty much hands-on's a big thing with me. Soft tissue work's important, part of my treatment.
Yeah.
So unless I spend a bit of time doing that, I just don't feel happy that I'm doing the job with the patient. Not to say, I've got some working for me in the past who are very good practitioners working very quickly.
Yeah.
And I had no problems with that, but it's just the way I was brought up,
Right. So tell us now that, you've been practicing for a long time and you've had osteopathy just kind of really influence you and also your thought process as a clinician. Can you explain how osteopathic principles kind of come to life in your practice? How do you practically apply them in delivering, say, a diagnosis and then a treatment? Like, what's your thought process? How do you engage with the patient and let osteopathy kind of do its thing for you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely whole body. Definitely, just because they've got a sore neck, doesn't necessarily mean the neck. You've got to look wider. You've got to look at the whole body. And not that you get too carried away. Sometimes people get carried away with a foot problem and think that's causing the problem, and they spend all their time on their foot. You don't do that. You still treat the neck.
Yeah.
Because the neck's still a problem.
Yeah.
And that's where some people do go wrong. They say, the neck problem is because of L5 on the left, and they spend all the time on L5 on the left, and the patient ends up coming to me and say they won't do my neck, and so you got to be careful to still treat where the problem is.
Yeah,
but then you have to look wider afield. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess in terms of looking at self-regulation, homeostasis as an important principle, there is your primary role to just let the body do its work. Are you just kind of sweeping things out of the way and and letting the body recover and heal. And is that the way you think about what's going on?
Yeah, the body will always try and heal itself unless you're treating it very poorly. And that goes with anything in life, any health issue, you stop causing the problem and the body will start to get better. You stop eating crap food and you'll start feeling better.
See, I asked this question to a lot of a lot of the practitioners I've been interviewing, and the ones that have been around for a while, a long time, and they're really learning osteopathy, it almost seems like I'm asking them silly questions, like when I say, about homeostasis regulation, they just look at me and go, well, of course, it's like you guys have already got that so ingrained in your thought process. It's not really something that you think about anymore. It's just like you're playing music and you know how to play, and it just comes naturally to you. So it's something that we need to also discuss, especially for younger practitioners, because I don't think they're receiving that at the moment. But we'll discuss that in another question. Moving on to Queensland, you moved up to Queensland, I think you said in '86.
Yeah, the end of '86.
And tell us about the early days of osteopathy in Queensland. What were some of the challenges there? Tell us about that.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, well, the first problem when I came to Townsville, I wasn't going to stay here, but somebody suggested I go and talk to the local TAFE, and they said, "Oh, we're looking for someone to teach a massage course here. You want to do that?" So I thought, "Oh yeah, there's a go." So I was just teaching the massage course, and then I was only going to stay for a year and then move on. But then, because from there, people say, "Oh, can I get a treatment off you?" And then after about a year or so, I thought, "Oh, yeah, it was going all right in the town." So I thought, "Oh, I might stay." So I filled out the application it was all paper in those days.
Were you married then, mate? Did you have a family?
No, not then. I was still single then.
Yeah. Well, it's a good lifestyle up there.
Yeah. But there was plenty of girls too, That's probably like every summer I was going to go, but then I'd have a new girlfriend each summer, so I'd have to stay.
That would keep you tied down.
Yeah. And I filled out my application, sent it off to the Queensland Chiropractor and Osteopaths Registration Board, and thinking it was just going to happen.
A formality.
Yeah, sent my copy of my New South Wales registration with it, and then came back, I was rejected, and then I rang up and said, "So what's the story?" And they said, "Oh, you've got to go to approved college." And then I said, "What's your approved college?" And they said, "Sydney College of Chiropractic." the, the, the irony.
So
The irony of that is
that's,
we actually finished there. We actually finished
yeah.
our studies.
So they really wanted you to
go.
to go and study to be a chiropractor, really.
Yeah.
That's what they're telling you.
The board was only chiropractors. Where they were supposed to have 2 osteopaths on the board, but they reckon there weren't any, so they had to be all chiropractors. And that's where Thomas Whitten, I contacted Thomas because I knew he was doing some work in Brisbane to try and get registration through. And he had already found out a lot of interesting things about the board. One of the board members was Joe Bioka-Peterson's personal chiropractor, so that made it a bit tough the time. But I started approaching politicians in the north here and just got nowhere, just ran into a brick wall every time. And though we actually we hired some lawyers who was to start doing some work for us, and I think it was Thomas Whitten is probably the guy to ask this question. They got back, and apparently a couple of the board members had criminal records, which is illegal. They shouldn't have been on the board. So we thought, excellent, we've got a chance here. Before we could do anything, those members had resigned and 2 new blokes had been appointed. So we missed out on that chance. Then there was a change of government, and the new health minister was a local member in Townsville here, one of the local members. I went out and talked to him, and he was very sympathetic, and he said, I'll talk to the board. And then I said, I'd passed the 83 exams and all this. And he came back and said, the board said all those exams were a load of crap, weren't worth the paper they were printed on. And I have to admit, the probably earlier ones, like around 90, 91, I was seeing copies of them and they were very easy. I think it was the way they were trying to get as many through as they could in the early days. And then they started getting tougher and tougher.
Right.
But we were in contact with then the UAPG, the New South Wales branch of what's now Osteopathy Australia. And they, out of the blue, I got a phone call. I think it was from Roman Maslak.
Yep.
I think Roman was the president at the time. And he rang up and said, go and talk to Professor Ray Golding. And I knew Ray's name because he was the Vice Chancellor at James Cook University in Townsville. And I said, why should I talk to Ray? And he said, well, Ray set your exams.
Oh,
and I said,
okay.
That'll be interesting. So I went out and saw Ray, and that was a story in itself.
So those are the exams in 83 that you sat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And went out and talked to Ray. I told him the whole lead up to it.
Right.
And his words were, why didn't you come and talk to me earlier? And I said, well, I only just found out. And he said, I have no problems because we did make the exams fairly easy to start with. By 83, we started making them a lot tougher.
Yeah.
He says, leave it with me. You just leave it with me. And I said,
right.
Okay.
So sorry, Peter. Earlier you said that 91 they were you mean it's 81?
Easier. No,
so
81.
81,
Sorry.
right.
I'm showing
So
my age
right,
here.
so yeah,
1981.
So 1981 they were easier, and by 83 they became a lot tougher.
Yeah,
Right.
They were quite significantly harder because I saw some old exams. That's how I knew this.
Okay.
Someone had showed them to me, and then Ray just said, "Leave me your phone number, and I'll take care of everything." He says, and I said, "Okay."
That's handy.
And it was interesting. It was an interesting experience though because Ray was, I don't know if anyone, he had a few health issues and his room was all closed up and he's wearing a jumper, and this is Townsville, sweat's just pouring off me. But anyway, lo and behold, just after that, there's another story. This is 91 now that we're talking about,
right.
This story. I got married just after that, and I was off on my honeymoon, and by coincidence, the general meeting of the UAPG that year was combined with the AOA, the Australian Osteopathic Association. That was the year they merged.
Yeah.
That meeting was to merge the two organisations. And anyway, I walked into the meeting, and that way you can claim your honeymoon as a tax deduction, see, by going to things like that. And Thomas Whitten was there, and he came up to me and he says, "Oh, have you heard?" And I go, "No, I've been on my honeymoon, I haven't heard anything." He's gone, the health minister sacked the whole board and he's reappointed a new board. And Thomas said, "I'm on the board." He was on the board. So the health minister, Ken McGilligan, obviously come good. So I'd say Professor Golding's run Ken McGilligan and said,
Yeah.
this is what the truth is. When I went back to Townsville and went in to see Ken, the health minister, I walked into his office and he was busy writing something. He didn't even lift his head up and he said, Peter, I'm sorry, they lied to me. So anyway, from then, that was 91, you could get registered in Queensland from then on as an osteopath. So even though...
So Ray Golding came good. He was the one that kind of spoke to the minister and said, look, 81 might have been a bit easier, but 83 was a lot tougher.
Yeah. He was good. He was good for both professions, actually, the chiropractors and the osteopaths.
Yeah, I spoke to Ann Cooper and John Abdullah, who they sat there. I think they did an 89, and they sat board exams, and they said that they were the toughest thing they'd ever done.
They just got harder and harder.
Yeah, right.
So you really had to be. I think the first uni course started in 86. I think so. That was down at PIT in Melbourne. I think once they finished, then they stopped. You had to do a uni course. There was no other option to get in.
Well, I guess then that's a real good history lesson for younger practitioners who may not be aware that there was a time where you couldn't practice. You were threatened with not being able to practice, and it sounds like that the chiropractors were trying to strong arm their way around and not have osteopaths, not make it easy for osteopaths to...
In Queensland it was that way.
Yeah,
I think in New South Wales they were a bit fairer. And the funny thing is, when we passed our New South Wales exams, we could join the Chiropractic Association.
Yeah.
And because it was still touch and go, a lot of us joined both. We joined the Chiropractic Association and the Osteopathic Association.
So could you call yourself a chiropractor, or was it?
In those days you could,
Yeah. But you didn't, right?
I didn't, but if I did.
Why would you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it was a funny time because my chiropractic registration had a couple of signatures on it, and one of them was a member of the chiropractic board in Queensland. And I asked them to explain this, that how come this guy thinks I was good enough to be in the association? You guys reckon I'm not. Didn't get me anywhere. But it was that was just showing they were being pig-headed.
Yeah, okay.
They just had their own little world up there. And
mate, that's an interesting experience, and interesting probably now to look back on it, but probably a tough thing to live through.
Well, as I tell students when I speak to them, there was a bloke in the year behind us committed suicide. And that's one of the reasons he put down that he'd done all that study and he didn't think he'd ever be able to practice.
That's awful.
So, yeah.
Mate, well, moving forward, I want to discuss some of your experiences with athletic performance. And you've worked with the North Queensland Cowboys up there and the Australian track and field team, especially before I think you said to me before the Atlanta Olympics.
Yeah.
You helped them prepare.
That was an interesting time.
Tell us about that experience and how did that come about? Like, how did you get into that?
It was because the Cowboys came in 95, and I was working for them. People like Kerry Boasted were patients of mine, so it helps you get a job when. Anyway, I was working for the Cowboys, and in '96, the Australian track and field team came to Townsville before they went to Atlanta because they wanted somewhere hot to train in, because I think the Atlanta Olympics were going to be in
the summer,
the late summer over there, and so they wanted to come somewhere warm to train. So they came up here for a few months. Different branches of them came up at different times, but the bulk they were all here at one time, and they were looking for somebody. And through my working with the Cowboys, someone just rang me up and said, "Can you come down?" And so they were set up at a resort here, and I spent quite a few weeks. It was quite an interesting time. Yeah.
So tell us about your work with the Cowboys. You said, you said that you're working with the Cowboys. I mean, you're working as an osteopath. Tell us about that. Tell us about the specifics of that. Like, what were you doing?
Well, the players could come to see me at the clinic. They had a health cover that covered them wherever they went, so they could come.
Right.
So they didn't have to pay to come and see me. They could claim it. Or by paper in those days.
And they didn't have physiotherapists, so you were the kind of they had a team.
Well. Yeah, they had physio, they had an exercise strength and conditioning coach, and the whole crew. Yeah, and it was good working with them. Yeah.
And so why would they choose to see you, for example, as opposed to seeing the physio? Like what?
Oh, the ones. I mean, each player had their favourites, really.
Yeah.
But I guess I was a lot more hands on.
Okay.
So blokes had come in and their backs were really sore, and rather than give the first physio the first year didn't do a lot of hands on work. You know. The later ones were a bit more hands on, so they got a bit better. But I'd help out too. We did some time in the gym with the boys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've done strength and conditioning courses and stuff like that. Weight.
And when did you stop working with the Cowboys?
That was the end of 91. They went broke.
Yeah.
I had 3 young kids. They'd gone broke.
So the end of 91 or 2000? Because you said you started
2001.
2001, right? Okay.
Way past my bedtime.
Yeah.
It was the end of 2001. The year after, Tim Sheens got sacked during the year.
Yeah.
And then the club was pretty much, as you know, they've certainly got out of it and came back.
Yeah.
I could stay on, but the money wasn't going to be there.
Did you find the players continued to come and see you though?
The ones that were there when I was there, quite a few kept coming till they left town. As we did.
Right. And tell us about the track and field team. They came up to North Queensland whilst you were working with the Cowboys, and you got in that way. What kind of work were you doing with them? Tell us about that.
Mostly soft tissue stuff. They wanted someone who could just whatever it was dependent on what the player wanted. There was that was interesting because the power athletes were in one place and the endurance athletes stayed in another place. And the endurance athletes didn't think a hell of a lot of the power athletes, but the endurance athletes was Monaghetti, Steve Monaghetti, and Rob Quilty and a few of those blokes, and the poor girl that died of cancer too. What was her name? Anyway, she they were all over there, so I'd drive back and forth between the 2 locations. And the power athletes were interested. There's a lot of interest.
Right. That was in 96 or just before 96.
96. That was the Australian winter. Right. The Australian they came up for the winter so they could stay in warm weather.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I guess just for the listeners that are really kind of intrigued about that experience of yours with the Cowboys and with the track and field team, can you give any advice to people wanting to go down that path? What should they be aware of? How should they go about getting exposure to that kind of market? Like, I've been involved with football teams and athletes for a long time, and my perception is that I think people see it as being a little bit glamorous when it's not overly glamorous. They think you're going to run out in the field with the players and lift the trophy at the end of the season, but it's not like that. Like it's a bit dirty and dingy and smelly, and the players just want to get back out on the field, and that you're there really to just patch them up and go.
They usually use former players as the ones that run out in the field and take the drinks out and So usually former players, everyone else stays in the dressing room doing the hard work.
Well, if people want to go down that path, what should they be aware of, and how would you go about kind of doing that? Can you give advice on that?
A lot of it's who you know. To be involved with people. Like if I was lucky, and initially I knew the coach, knew the general manager, because
it's still a bit of a boys' club, isn't it?
Yeah, that sort of got me in, and even after I left, there was still there was still the opportunity to go back. But by then, as I said, I had 3 kids. They were starting to play sport. I'd much rather stand on the field and watch a bunch of under-12s run around than highly paid footballers.
It's usually a single man's kind of, or a single person's endeavour, because it does take away from your evenings, it takes away from your weekends. It's a lot of work. Players, I think if you speak to them one-on-one, are very appreciative, but in the moment, it doesn't look like they just want you to patch them up so they can kind of get going.
Yeah.
And you're right, totally. It's about who you know, and if hopefully that you're good enough to also get the results, because who you know will get you into the door. But you're going to get results from. You're going
Oh
to work
yeah,
hard. It's hard
yeah,
work. It's hard working on especially the power athletes. They're
yeah.
tough.
If the players like you, they'll stand up for you.
Yeah,
If a new coaches come and go, like there was 3 coaches while I was at the Cowboys. 3 different coaches.
yeah,
If you're doing that, they'll say to the coach, "Oh, he's all right." So you that's one way of keeping you in there. Once you're in there, is to make sure the players like you.
Well, I guess the players need to be happy because they're the ones being worked on as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the rugby league's a brutal sport though.
Mm.
It's yeah.
Did you find that the track and field athletes were a little bit more aware of their body, or at least appreciative of their recovery, as opposed to the rugby league guys?
Yeah, it was very much a science for the track and field people. They although they're interesting talk about the science. I was over with the endurance guys, and they'd all been going down to get the skin fold test done. And the leanest athletes were some of the power athletes, like some of the sprinters.
Yeah.
And Steve Monaghetti walked in. He had the results, and he says, "Oh, look at this!" And they're all staring at him. He's reading the results, saying, "Who's the leanest athletes?" And it was a couple of the power athletes. There was one bloke there who was built like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was a sprinter, and he had the leanest skin fold test. And Steve sort of tapped himself. I wonder how he could get so lean. Wish I could be that lean. Like
for the weightlifting, Steve.
Yeah, they knew they were on the roids. See.
Yeah.
They knew the power guys, even in those days, they were on the roids.
Yeah.
The steroids and keeping themselves lean.
Look, I mean, that's true, and that's a very valid point. But you still got to work hard, even if you're on the steroids. Like it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I that's why it's well, I've talked to many a sports doctor, and that they much rather the players come clean with them, and they're quite happy. They're quite happy to keep quiet about it.
Yeah.
They just want the player to tell them, so they can keep doing the liver tests and making sure that the roids aren't damaging them,
Yeah.
or net growth hormone or whatever they're on. So I've known several doctors over the years work with, top athletes, and the doctors knew they were on stuff, but they kept quiet about it, because they knew if they didn't, the players wouldn't trust them and they wouldn't see anybody.
Yeah, and I guess it's on them at the end of the day. It's the player's responsibility,
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know at the moment the association, the Osteopathy Australia Association, they have a program for being titled as an advanced sports osteopath. Given your history, are you interested in something like that?
Probably not now. Probably 30 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, sign me up. But now, probably just too quiet for that now. I'm hoping to go back to about 2 or 3 days a week soon.
Yeah.
Especially if I can get another osteopath up here.
Are you finding it hard to get people up there?
Yeah, it's always been hard. When they come up here, they all say to me, "Oh, this is so good." Like we've had one girl just left after 11 years. She only left because the husband wanted to move down south. She'd still be here, and it always got talking to new grads that come up here. About a year into their time here, they'll be telling me all their friends who haven't even got jobs yet. Students still doing bar work in Melbourne. Still doing bar work and not doing anything.
We've got the same experience here in Sydney, mate. We tell people all the time, you come out here, you're probably on about $1,500 a week pretty quickly, and the sky's the limit from there. And they don't believe us, but we're just crying out for students. And I think we need. You need a course here in Sydney. It's the biggest market in Australia, and there's no course.
Yeah.
So I guess you probably need one in Queensland too. I mean, the course in Lismore will offer students to the Gold Coast, I guess, and maybe Brisbane. But
they get taken.
Going up to North Queensland would be a different priority for them.
They need to make money out of the uni courses now, unfortunately, and osteopathy is pretty intensive, so they don't think they make enough money out of it, so they won't do it.
Well, we need to come up with some smarter models, around education. And, we at the moment, it's looking like ARPA is trying to just get all all the allied health kind of looking the same, like osteopaths and physios and chiros and EPs, we all eventually look the same way. And so we need to really find out how we're going to keep our identity. We need to come up with a solution for that. Otherwise, we're the tiniest out of those big three, and we'll be probably the first to get swallowed up. So, if we don't act, we've got no one else to blame except ourselves.
Well, people come to us because we're osteopaths.
Yeah.
They don't come to us because. So if you're just doing exercise phys stuff with your patients, they can go to. There's 100 exercise physios.
Yeah.
In this town, there's heaps because they do it at James Cook Uni. If you think that's the way to go, you're not going to get a lot of work. But if you touch your patients and do a bit of work on them, they're going to think, "Wow, this is good."
Well, this takes me to my next question. Given your experience in sports medicine, you're the perfect person to speak about kind of the infiltration of exercise science into osteopathy, because it has come through. If you look at a lot of the new graduates and even a lot of the university courses, it's very recipe based, protocol based. There's protocols for things rather than looking at the body from a holistic point of view and trying to assess strain patterns and trying to unwind things. Give us your views on that and the infiltration of exercise science, like into osteopathy or allied health in general. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't want to put anyone down.
Feel free to say anything you like, mate. This is a free speech podcast. You can go for your life.
If you want to do exercise phys, be an exercise phys. Don't be an osteopath, because osteopathy is not exercise phys. I went down and did the early seminars with Hodge on core stability down, when he was doing it at UQ, University of Queensland, and it's.
The reason why I'm asking you, Peter, the reason why I'm asking you this question is you've literally worked with top flight football teams, and you've worked with top flight athletes, and so if somebody is going to move towards an exercise-based type of, you'd think it'd be somebody that's worked with those types of in those lines of work, but you've still maintained that osteopathy is the thing that got you into that door. And so that's why I'm asking you that question. And how you feel about exercise science and its infiltration into osteopathy.
Well, I go about it in a roundabout way. Going back into the early 80s, there was a physiotherapist in Sydney called Ian Collier. I don't know if you know him. He and his partner, Greg Craig, were probably the doyens of the physiotherapy profession. They were the physios for the Wallabies and the New South Wales Waratahs, and they had their clinic first at DY, then at Narrabeen Fitness Centre there where the Institute of Sport is. I knew Ian very well because he was in the rugby union club I was involved with. And he used to bring students down because he was a teacher at the old Cumberland College where they used to do physiotherapy in those days. And he used to bring students down to the rugby club with us. And we'd chat away. And I'd often sit with the young final year physio students, and I remember one girl turning to me and said, "So, I think I was still a student then. It might have been in my last year or just after that." Anyway, she said, "So what electrotherapy modules do you use?" And I've gone, "None." And she's going, "What? No electrotherapy? How can you possibly train? If you're going to treat people if you don't know any electrotherapy?" And she went on and on and on and on, and I'm sitting there going, I didn't know what to say because I didn't have any experience with it really. I didn't really know one way or the other. So anyway, but later on, after that, I had a chat to Ian about it, and I said, "So, what do you think?" And he goes, "I'll never forget this." He goes, "Peter, electrotherapy will be the downfall of the physiotherapy profession," because he could see it coming, that the students weren't touching their patients anymore. They were just hooking them up to a machine. And, you talk about science in treatment, and the physios were saying osteopaths were unscientific. Well, I don't know if you ever read the British Medical Journal showing that how unscientific electrotherapy was, but it's a great article if you ever come across it.
Yeah.
And then after that, I've lost track of things, oh, if you don't do this, if you don't learn this, you won't be doing that, And then there was Bowen therapy, and God, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, there's always a new package to things,
and then core stability. That was the first real exercise thing that came in. You have to do. They were saying, if you don't get into this core, because you won't have any work, because all back problems will be fixed by doing this core stability work.
Yeah, and they weren't. Yeah, and so, what is the core? They can't even define what the core is.
Well, even
there's some center of the earth part of the body that's more important than everything else in the body. It's delusional. It doesn't make sense.
I said to Hodge in a seminar at UQ, I said, but the body isn't a multifidus.
Yeah.
Because they were saying, multifidus is everything.
Or transverse abdominis or whatever the hell that.
Yeah. I'm going, and he actually said, no, you're right. There's more to this. But I mean, they did some good work. They certainly made some sprinters run faster, but that was more strength training, I think, than
mate. The sprinters are deadlifting and squatting, hundreds of kilos, and that's the reason why their strength numbers are really high, and they've got good force transfer. And I think we forget about athletes is that these athletes are self-selected over many years because they're naturally gifted. And a lot of them are actually very, very good athletes, not because of, but in spite of the silly exercise science that's gone into them. They're naturally gifted, and that's a lot of the reason why they're there. It's their genetics that's giving them 90% of the things that they're getting.
Yeah, so technique works more for them than anything else. There's a certain amount you need strength, but if your technique's poor, then you're probably going to get injured more than working one particular muscle group.
Yeah, definitely, and that's all the neuromotor kind of skills and the things that they have, and they're all genetic based stuff. They're things that you're born with and your natural talent. So,
and it comes in. They like talking about. You'd never see another patient with lower back problem because they'll all do their core stuff, and there's more lower back problems now than there ever was. But then you'll never see another shoulder problem because we've got all our patients doing their little
rubber bands,
exercises, and so you'll never see another problem with the shoulders. Well, there's just as many shoulder problems now. They've usually done all their exercises and they've still got the shoulder problem. And because someone forgot to have a look at the back of the scapula or something like that, that's usually what's happened.
Or the thoracics or the CT or
And I've had a couple. I showed an Australian representative volleyball player. It's come to me many times, and she kept she's having a lot of shoulder problems, and she was doing all the shoulder, having all the electrotherapy, all the exercises, and all I did was give her scapula good work, crack her thoracics, and she going, oh shit, geez, that feels better. You ask her what she thinks. She goes, you go to an osteopath, don't go to them.
Well, there's some research that's come out recently that's shown how the improvement in thoracic function will improve shoulder conditions, and I guess we've always known that, and as osteopaths we're really working on the front lines of and pushing the boundaries of what works and what doesn't. And I guess if you're going to wait for evidence to come out to tell you that this works or this doesn't, how many people are you going to miss out on helping?
No, it's as you say, and thoracics with a neck problem, any neck problem is a thoracic problem.
You just have to look at it.
They tie in together. They can't be one. And any lumbar problem is also a thoracic problem.
So you just told me about your days as a younger student in terms of talking to this physiotherapy with physiotherapists with the electrotherapies. Over the years, you've had students come and work with you and also become graduates and work with you as new graduates. And you've had many of those over at least the last 20 or 30 years that you've been working. How have the graduates evolved? What are you seeing, say, now in graduates versus, say, people that you worked with back in, the late 90s, early 2000s?
Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes, so for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy, and back to the show.
They've altered a bit because their training has changed too. Some of the early ones they were still fairly hands-on, even though some of them were told not to massage by Cynthia Tucker back at VU in the day, and but a lot of them they just did a bit of rubbing anyway. It's if every new student I have, I tell them this: if you get through a treatment and you're not happy with the results, just give them a massage for 10 minutes, and they'll be happy.
Okay. Well, the patient will be happy.
Yeah. They'll just think, well, they didn't quite fix me, but they really tried, and it felt
the
good.
power of touch. Yeah.
Never be afraid to do that.
What about their thought process, Peter? Like, how are you finding the thought process of, say, someone that's coming out now versus the earlier, graduates, say, 15, 20 years ago?
My first associates, they were still fairly whole body looking at things more than they are now. Now they are a bit more physio
compartmentalised.
Yeah. Again, it depends on who they had at uni.
Yeah.
Fortunately, a few of them have had former associates of mine teaching them at uni, so they knew I was coming up here, so they knew what I'd want, so they sort of gave them a crash course in it, So that always helps.
Yeah, that's good. I guess, well, you've mentioned kind of the same thing that other people have mentioned, in that it's really important who's teaching you and who's mentoring you, and looks like that's making a difference. But when you're paying, I guess when you're at university and you're paying, I think they're paying close to $100,000, if not more than $100,000 for the course over that's a lot of debt to go into, and not graduate at least knowing how to work as an osteopath. And so, that's a shame. That it's really down to individual students finding good mentors to kind of make sure that they're up to scratch.
Yeah, I often say to the students, if they're still in their first or second year, and I speak to them, if they can afford it, so go and do a part-time massage course somewhere, because you'll get another look at the body that's not so academically orientated that they're getting in first and second year, and it'll open up a new world for them. And the ones that I've spoken to who did that, I've had a few work for me who did that. They went out, they were doing osteopathy, they did a massage course, continued on, finished their osteopathy. And they said it was the best thing they ever did. Yeah, it opened their eyes to the body. They're in there touching and feeling bodies before they left uni, which can make it, it's a bit hard. And I tend to find those ones, if they send me their CV and it said working with a sporting team, doing this and doing that. And year one, I was working as a massage therapist. They tend to be the better osteopaths.
So other than that piece of advice that you've just given in terms of doing a massage course, can you give advice to new graduates in terms of just hitting the ground running? So you've graduated, you're an osteopath, you've kind of gone into work at a clinic. What's the best thing that they could do in, say, the really early time, the first 3 to 6 months of their career? What's the best thing that you found that they could do to just make sure they hit the ground running and they start seeing results in the clinic?
The best thing they can do is see a lot of patients. Your best teacher is your patient, over time. I've had people come and work for me here who are in clinics in Melbourne. They were lucky if they were seeing 2 patients a day. The rest of the time they were working as a receptionist, They come up here and I've got them doing 10 a day, and it's like, wow, this is so much better, and they learn rapidly. But of course, the important thing if you're a new grad is you need someone to talk to. You need someone to bounce things off. It's very hard to, some people try and go out on their own straight out of uni, but you really don't know bugger all.
Yeah, no, you'd struggle in today's environment, just going out on your own straight away. That's not really advised.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, mate, just to to move on from that, in terms of what we're seeing with graduates, what we're seeing in the current landscape with university courses and what's going on here in Australia with osteopathy, How do you see the future of osteopathy in Australia? What are some of the challenges and opportunities ahead for the profession?
Well, I mean, the first positive is that Edith Cowan University starting a course, because we do need more courses. I mean, the fact that I can put an ad, in that osteopathy jobs Facebook page and get zero response. People go, "Oh, you need to offer more money." I go, "Well, can they contact me first, and then we'll come to a deal. Tell me how much you want to make. I'll probably pay it, because it's as I always joke that people go, "So what do you ask new grads when you're asking them, doing an interview with them? What's the first thing you ask them?" And I say, "When can you start?" Because
you're just going to give them a job straight away. I mean, you've only got one applicant of one.
I know. You just take what you can get. We've brought a few out from England over the years. But I'll stop that because it's a pain in the arse, the paperwork. But we've had good and bad ones there. Had some good ones, but had some pretty ordinary ones. Do
you find that's the toughest part of your day? Like, treating is probably a breeze for you now, but do you find that managing people and managing staff, is that really the toughest part of what you do?
Yeah, it's up and down with the osteopaths. I mean, the crew I've got now have been really good. Fact is, once you get to 5 of different vintages, they can talk to each other. When you've got, we've got a couple of people here with 20 years experience, so they can bounce things off them. They don't always have to come to me. They can go to one of them and ask a question. It's but yeah, you still got the problem with a big clinic though. You've got reception staff and other things too that takes up a lot of time.
They're things that you need to manage.
Yeah. The crew I've got now are good. Actually, it's a really good crew. If anyone wants to come and join them.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone wants to go up, but you'll get a crash course in osteopathy pretty quick with Peter. Peter, where can people find you, mate? If they do want to reach out to you, where can they find you? Like, on Facebook, on email, website?
The Facebook page. We should make that. Because we're so busy, we tend to have not done a lot of keeping up with the Facebook page. And we've got a website which just crashed and we've just got it back again. So hopefully we're trying to jazz up our website, because another reason, when you're flat out, you forget to do things like that, because you think, people go, "Oh, you need a better website." And I go, "Where are we going to put the patients if they come here anyway?" We've got to wait, flash it on. I'm just having a quick look at the list of patients. There'd be 30 names on this. These are people trying to get in at the moment.
So anyone listening, you want to come up and work with Peter. There's 30 people there waiting to see you.
There's a week's work straight away.
Yeah, right. So what I'll do, Peter, is I'll link your website in the show notes.
Yeah, it'll look better in a few weeks, but it's back on now. So
I'll put your email on there too. So if anyone wants to get in contact with Peter, they can.
Yeah, that's one of the easiest ways.
Peter, I want to thank you for your time today, mate. I'm going to continue this conversation for my Success in Practice students on the other side of this with Peter. I'm going to discuss some more technical aspects of treating sports injuries and working with athletes. But for everyone else tonight and today, thank you for joining us. And I guess we'll see everyone in the next episode. Peter, thank you so much.
Thanks,